The microphone was still warm from her hand when the entire room went silent. 40 people, crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, a five-star restaurant with a view of the city I'd spent my whole life trying to belong in. And right there in front of every person I had ever known, my mother smiled, smoothed her dress, and told the world I was a tax deduction. Not her daughter. Not even a mistake. A write-off. I sat in that ribbon-wrapped chair and felt 40 pairs of eyes swing toward me like a spotlight I never asked for. My sister was already laughing. My father was staring at his plate like it held the answers to every question he'd been too cowardly to face. And Patricia, the woman who had raised me for 30 years, stood at that podium with something glittering in her eyes that I can only describe as triumph. She thought she had won. She thought I would crumble, run, disappear quietly the way she had always wanted me to. But here's what Patricia didn't know what none of. They knew as I sat frozen in that chair with my hands folded in my lap, there was an envelope in my clutch. A cream-colored envelope with a wax seal and a dead woman's initials pressed into it. And what was inside that envelope was about to make my mother flee her own party before the cake was even cut. Stay with me because what I am about to tell you will leave you speechless. My name is Myra. I am 30 years old. And for most of those 30 years, I believed that belonging was something you had to earn. I was adopted at age 2. I knew this the way I knew my own reflection. It was simply a fact of my existence, woven into the fabric of who I was before I could form memories around it. Patricia never let me forget it either. Not with cruelty, always. Sometimes it was subtler than that. A pause before my name at dinner parties. An introduction that always placed me slightly apart. This is Jenna, our daughter. And this is Myra. That pause. That tiny, deliberate silence. I did it 1,000 times growing up, and I told myself it didn't matter. It mattered. Jenna was everything Patricia had wanted. Blonde, confident, carefully photographed, and documented the way parents document the children they're proud of. When Jenna turned 15, there was a pool party, 30 friends, a DJ, a professional photographer who charged more than my monthly grocery bill. When I turned 18, there was a grocery store cake and a birthday card with nothing written inside except happy birthday. Not even her name signed at the bottom. I built my life anyway. I studied hard. I became an architect at Harrison and Cole, a real firm, real blueprints, real career. I rented a cramped one-bedroom apartment alone because living with family had never truly been an option. I told myself the distance was healthy, that I had made peace with the space between us. The person who made that bearable was Grandma Grace. She was the only one who ever looked at me like I was exactly where I was. Supposed to be. She used to hold my hand at holiday dinners when Patricia made her little digs. She whispered to me once in her garden when I was crying and thought no one could see. "You belong here more than you know, sweetheart. One day you'll understand." I never understood what she meant. 6 months before my birthday party, Grandma Grace passed. We had the funeral. We read the will, or so I thought. We said our goodbyes, and I grieved quietly the way I had always done everything quietly, alone, without making a scene. Then, one Thursday night at almost 8 o'clock, my phone rang. Unknown number. Boston area code. Miss Anderson. "My name is Theodore Whitman. I was your grandmother's attorney." I straightened in my chair. "There are documents your grandmother left specifically for you. She was very particular no one else in your family should know about this conversation." My heart began to pound. Grandma Grace had kept secrets. Secrets meant only for me. Part of me was terrified of what I would find. A bigger part needed to know. But what happened next nobody could have prepared for. Theodore Whitman's office smelled like old leather and mahogany. He placed a cream-colored envelope on the desk between us, sealed with wax. Grandma Grace's initials pressed into it, and told me she had prepared it 5 years ago, in perfect health, of completely sound mind. Inside were 3 things: a copy of her will, a personal letter, and a smaller sealed envelope with a handwritten instruction. Only open when absolutely necessary. I scanned the will until I found my name. My hand stopped moving. "I hereby bequeath the Anderson estate, along with all property and contents therein, to my granddaughter Myra Anderson." I stopped breathing. The Anderson estate. The mansion where every holiday happened, every reunion, every important family gathering. The house Patricia had been decorating for 20 years like it was already hers. "The will goes public in 2 weeks. Whitman's. Aid. Your grandmother wanted you to have time to prepare." "Prepare for what?" His expression was grim. "For what your family might do when they find out." That night, something else happened, something that felt at first like a gift. Patricia sent a message to the family group chat. "Big news. We're throwing Myra a 30th birthday dinner at the Sterling. Saturday the 15th, 7 p.m. Everyone's invited. I read it 3 times. The Sterling was one of Boston's most exclusive restaurants. In 30 years, my parents had never once thrown me a party like that. Something felt wrong immediately, the way finding money on the street feels wrong. Because you know there has to be a catch. But that hopeful voice inside me, the one I could never fully silence, whispered, maybe she's finally trying. Maybe this is different. Patricia replied almost instantly to my thank you. You deserve it, sweetheart. Sweetheart. She had never called me that before. I set down my phone and stared at the ceiling. I had 2 weeks before the will went public. Something in my bones told me I should know everything Grandma Grace had left me before I walked into any party Patricia planned. I met Lucas the next day, my closest friend from the firm. He found me at Nordstrom, overthinking a dress, and made me tell him everything. Not all of it, but enough. He listened without interrupting. Then he said something I would never forget. Myra, you've walked into that family's traps your whole life. If there's even a chance this party is another one, don't go in empty-handed. I don't want to turn my birthday into a war. He looked at me steadily. You might not have a choice. Just be prepared. That night, I laid everything on my bed. The will, the letter, the sealed envelope I still hadn't opened. The clutch I'd bought was barely big enough for a phone and lipstick, but just big enough for the truth. I tucked the envelope inside, just in case. I didn't know then how right Lucas would be. And here is the part that Knob Audie talks about. While I was choosing that clutch, while I was telling myself maybe this was finally different across town, Patricia was pacing her living room, Jenna on the couch, and the plan she had been constructing for days was nearly complete. I found out about the will, Patricia said, her voice tight. She left the entire estate to Myra. Jenna dropped her phone. How is that even possible? It's legal. She did it years ago, behind everyone's back. Patricia's jaw tightened, which is why we need to act now. What do you mean? Patricia stopped pacing. Her eyes went cold. The birthday party. 40 guests. Everyone who matters. I don't understand. Myra has spent 30 years desperate to belong. If we humiliate her publicly, really humiliate her, she'll be too ashamed to show her face again. And once she's gone, contesting that will become much easier. Jenna hesitated. Mom, that's kind of harsh. That house was supposed to be yours, Jenna. Are you going to let some adopted charity see? AEs take it. The hesitation faded from Jenna's face. What do you need me to do? They had no idea what Grandma Grace had left me, and they had no idea that I was ready to use it. Rehook, stay with me, because what I am about to tell you will leave you speechless. The Sterling took my breath away. Crystal chandeliers, floor-to-ceiling windows, the glittering Boston skyline behind white tablecloths. A U-shaped banquet table dominated the room, and at its center a chair wrapped in ribbon. My chair. 40 guests already seated. Relatives I saw once a year. Family friends who had watched Patricia's quiet cruelties for decades and never intervened. And there, cutting through the room toward me, Aunt Helen. Richard's sister, flown in from California. She wrapped me in a real embrace, the kind that means something, and whispered against my ear, "Whatever happens tonight, remember your grandmother would be proud of you." I pulled back. What do you mean? A server called everyone to their TS before she could answer. Dinner was fine. Salmon, asparagus, polite conversation. I almost relaxed. Then Patricia stood. She smoothed her dress, walked to the small podium, tapped the microphone. The room went instantly quiet. Thank you all for being here tonight. Her voice was honey. We're celebrating someone very special. Our Myra is turning 30. Applause. Smiles. I gripped my napkin under the table. 30 years, Patricia continued. Can you believe it? It feels like yesterday that she came into our lives. Something shifted in her tone, barely perceptible. A slight edge creeping in beneath the warmth. I've been thinking a lot lately about Myra's journey, about where she came from, about everything this family has done for her. We've supported her through school, through her career, through everything. Patricia's smile widened. We've loved her like she was one of us. That single word dropped into the room like a stone into still water. But I think she paused dramatically. Why? Scanning the room, it's time we were honest, don't you? Murmurs rippled through the guests. Confused glances exchanged. I looked at my father. He was staring at his plate, shoulders hunched, refusing to look up. For 30 years we've kept a secret. But secrets have a way of coming out. And I think tonight, on Myra's special day, she deserves to finally know the truth. Across the table, Aunt Helen half rose. Patricia. Her voice was sharp. Don't do this. Patricia ignored her completely. Myra isn't our biological daughter. The words hit the room like a bomb. Gasps. Whispers. 40 pairs of eyes swiveled toward me. She's adopted. We took her in when she was 2. And do you know why? I sat frozen. Couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Tax benefits. Patricia actually laughed. The government had this wonderful program back then, adopt a child, get a nice deduction. Richard and I thought, well, why not? We could use the write-off. My ears were ringing. The room blurred at the edges. Somehow, air to my left, Jenna's laughter pierced the silence, sharp, cruel, echoing off the chandeliers. So there it is, Patricia continued, spreading her hands wide like a performer taking a bow. The truth. Myra was never really part of this family. She was a financial decision. She turned to me with exaggerated sympathy. I hope this doesn't upset you, sweetheart. But after 30 years of pretending, I thought you deserved honesty. 40 people stared at me, some horrified, some pitying. One woman was already whispering to her husband. My father still hadn't moved, hadn't looked up, hadn't said a single word in my defense. Jenna lowered her phone just long enough to call out, "Happy birthday, sis." More laughter from somewhere in the room. Patricia waited. She was waiting for me to crumble, to cry, to flee in humiliation. That's what she had planned for. But then I felt it, the weight of the envelope in my clutch. Grandma Grace's voice in my mind. Be brave, my darling. You are so much stronger than they've ever let you believe. And just when she thought it was over, I found something that changed everything. I took a breath, and I stood up. I didn't speak immediately. I stood there and let the silence stretch, let 40 pairs of eyes register that I wasn't crying, wasn't running, wasn't doing any of the things Patricia had scripted in her head. My hands were trembling, but my voice was steady. Thank you, Patricia, for that illuminating speech. Her smile faltered. I looked around the room at relatives who had treated me like furniture for decades, at family friends who had watched Patricia diminish me and never intervened, at my father still refusing to raise his head, at Jenna with her phone still recording. Good. Let her record everything. You're right about one thing, I said. It is time for truth. I reached into my clutch. Patricia's expression flickered. Uncertainty crept into her eyes for the first time all evening. I pulled out the envelope, cream-colored, gras. NDMA Grace's initials pressed into the wax seal. You wanted to do this publicly, Patricia, before 40 witnesses. So let's do it properly. The room went absolutely still. I caught Aunt Helen's gaze. She gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod. 2 weeks ago, I began, my voice carrying across the silent room, I received a call from Theodore Whitman, Grandma Grace's personal attorney. He had documents she had prepared 5 years ago, when she was sharp and healthy and knew exactly what she was doing. Patricia went rigid. I held up the envelope. This is a certified, notarized, legally binding copy of her will witnessed by 3 independent attorneys. My voice was clear. It states that the Anderson estate, the house, the property, all its contents passes to me, Myra Anderson. Gasps erupted across the room. That house has been in this family for 60 years. I looked directly at Patricia. She left it to me, not to you, not to Jenna, to me. That's impossible, Patricia sputtered. Tea House was supposed to have maintained that property for 20 years, maintained it. I tilted my head, or redecorated it like it was already yours. Someone in the back stifled a laugh. The will includes a statement, I read aloud. I make this decision because Myra is the only person in this family who loved me for myself, not for what I owned. Patricia's face contorted. That senile old woman had no right careful. My voice dropped to something quiet and very cold. That's my grandmother you're talking about. Aunt Helen stood. The will is valid, Patricia. I witnessed it myself. More gasps. More whispers. Patricia whirled on her sister-in-law. You knew about this? Mother was lucid. Sharper than any of us. Aunt Helen's voice was ice. She knew exactly what she was doing. I let the moment settle. Let Patricia feel the walls closing in. But here's the thing, I said slowly. The house isn't even the most interesting part. Patricia's eyes went wide. I unfolded Grandma Grace's letter. My grandmother. And Mother wrote this by hand, and it explains something that changes everything. The room was so quiet I could hear the chandelier crystals tinkling overhead. My dearest Myra, you are not a stranger who was adopted by chance. You are not some charitable act or tax benefit. You are my blood, my real blood. You are my granddaughter, the daughter of Marcus, my firstborn son. Chaos erupted. Marcus? Someone whispered. Who is Marcus? Patricia gripped the podium like she might collapse. That's a lie. Marcus was Richard's older brother. Aunt Helen's voice cut through the noise. He passed away when Myra was 2. He struggled with addiction. Our parents disowned him, pretended he'd never existed. Her voice was steady but heavy with old grief. When Marcus died, our mother was devastated. He had a daughter, a 2-year-old, who needed a home. She begged Richard to take her in, to keep Marcus's child in the family. She looked at me, eyes glistening. You're his niece, Myra. Richard's nigh. See, you always have been. I turned to Patricia. You knew. It wasn't a question. Her silence was admission enough. 30 years. My voice shook slightly, just slightly. You made me feel like an outsider for 30 years when I had more right to be here than you ever did. I reached into the envelope and pulled out the smaller sealed packet, the one I had not opened until this moment. Grandma Grace's handwriting on the front. Only open when necessary. If this wasn't necessary, nothing ever would be. Patricia lunged forward. Myra, wait whatever's in there. We can discuss this privately. I held it out of her reach. Like you privately planned tonight? Like you privately had Jenna record it to share my humiliation? She froze. Yes, I figured it out. I glanced at Jenna, who was frantically trying to stop her phone. The public shaming, the recording. You thought if you embarrassed me enough, I'd disappear. Then you could contest the will without a fight. I carefully broke the C. Ow. 2 items. First, a DNA test result dated 28 years ago. Second, an old photograph, faded at the edges. A young woman holding a baby. Same eyes. Same smile. Grandma Grace kept thorough records, I said quietly. Very thorough. I looked up at Patricia. Would you like to explain these? Or shall I? Her face had gone from white to green. This DNA test confirms I am Marcus Anderson's biological daughter. My voice was grounded, now steady, with the weight of truth finally spoken aloud. But there's something else. Something about Marcus himself. I read clearly. Marcus Anderson was not biologically related to Harold Anderson, the man listed as his father. The room erupted. It means, Aunt Helen said quietly, that our mother had Marcus before she married our father. Harold adopted him when they wed. Marcus was never a biological Anderson. I let that sink in. Marcus wasn't Harold's biological son. I am Marcus's biological daughter, which means I paused the Anderson family has. No blood claim to my grandmother's estate. Her property came from her family, not Harold's. I held up the photograph. You married into a family, I told Patricia, that has no connection to this inheritance. The estate belongs to Grandma Grace's bloodline. I lifted the photo higher, and that bloodline is me. Patricia swayed. You spent 30 years making me feel like I didn't belong, I said. But I'm the only one here who actually does. Someone started clapping, then another, then half the room. I didn't smile. I wasn't doing this for applause. I was doing it for truth. And the truth was finally free. Richard stood slowly. For the first time all evening, he looked his wife directly in the eye. Myra is my niece, he said quietly. My brother's daughter. She's always been family. His voice cracked. And I've spent 30 years watching you tear her down, watching you make her feel worthless. And I never stopped you. I never protected her. He turned to me. I'm sorry, Myra. I'm so deeply sorry. Patricia looked around the room desperately at guests who wouldn't meet her gaze, at Jenna crying silently in the corner, at the complete collapse of the perfect image she had constructed over decades. This isn't over, she hissed. I'll fight this. You'll lose. My voice was calm. The will is airtight. The evidence is documented. And everyone here just heard you call your adopted niece a tax benefit. I stepped closer. You wanted to humiliate me, Patricia. You wanted to make me disappear. But all you did was show everyone exactly who you are. Patricia's face crumpled. For the first time in 30 years, she had nothing to say. Then I heard it, the sharp click, click, click of her heels on marble, the rustle of her coat, the heavy thud of the restaurant door. She was gone. The party didn't end when Patricia fled. Impossibly, it actually began. Aunt Helen wrapped her arms around me and whispered, Your grandmother is smiling right now. I promise you, and I let myself be held. 4. The first time in 30 years, I cried not from pain, not from humiliation, from release. Someone started humming Happy Birthday. Then another voice joined. Then the whole room, soft and tentative. I laughed through my tears. The best birthday I had ever had. In the weeks that followed, I learned things I had never known. That Marcus had been brilliant, once talented, everyone's favorite before an accident and addiction swallowed everything. That Grandma Grace had never forgiven herself for not saving him. That in her bedroom closet, behind winter coats and hat boxes, there was a cardboard box full of photographs. Marcus as a child. Marcus as a teenager with paint-stained hands. Marcus holding a newborn baby May, grinning at the camera like he had won the lottery. On the back of that photo, in Grandma Grace's handwriting, Marcus and Myra, my 2 greatest loves. 1994. I pressed it to my chest and sobbed. I had never seen his face until that moment, but looking at him, I saw myself, the same eyes, the same crooked smile. I wish I had known you, I whispered to the empty room. The house was silent, but for the first time it felt like home. I created the Marcus Anderson Memorial Scholarship Fund for young artists aging out of the foster system, kids who needed someone to choose them the way nobody had chosen my father. The first recipient was a 17-year-old girl named Myra. At the ceremony, she tugged on my sleeve. "Did you ever feel like you didn't belong anywhere?" "Every single day," I told her honestly, until I stopped waiting for permission. She hugged me. It felt like hope. Here is what 30 years of pain finally crystallized into. You cannot force people to love you. You cannot contort yourself into belonging somewhere that refuses to hold space for you. But you can build a life where you belong to yourself first, where your worth is not a verdict handed down by others. I spent 3 decades auditioning for acceptance. I was never going to receive from someone who saw me only as a reminder of everything she feared. Their opinion of me was never my truth. My truth was mine to create. And on the night Patricia fled from her own party, clicking across that marble floor, crashing through that heavy door, running from the very thing she had set in motion, I finally understood something Grandma Grace had been trying to tell me for years. You don't need anyone's permission to belong. You never did. I just took 30 years to figure that out.